So we're gonna do a really quick intro to Blender today. If you aren't aware, is it showing up there?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, nice. Blender is a very versatile 3D modeling and honestly 3D anything software. If you need to make 3D assets for your game, Blender is pretty much has everything you need. So I put together kind of a PowerPoint. So today we're going to talk about Blender UI and hotkeys, modeling, some modifiers, UV unwrapping, materials, and rendering. So I'm going to try and cover quite a few things in a relatively short time period here. But we'll be pausing throughout so that everyone can catch up and be on the same page. So most Blender tutorials are going to teach you how to make a wooden cup. I don't know why that's the standard. I learned to make a wooden cup the first time I used Blender. Um, and I like it, but I thought maybe we can use some of the more like pretty simple but still cool looking Blender features to make something more like this. Um, so we've got the wine glass here, and then the background there. And I'll be asking you to find your own textures at a certain point, which you can just find off Google. So you can kind of make the scene your own. So that's going to be our final result, something like that. Made that in the library this morning. So we're going to start by modeling the wine glass. So does everyone have Blender open? Okay. You should see something like this. If you get a splash screen, you can just click anywhere off of it and it'll close. You don't have to worry about that. Um, so this is the default scene view, and I'll try and explain just a few things that we're seeing here. So the most of the screen is taken up by the viewport, which is where you see all the 3D objects in your scene. Right now we've got a cube, we've got a sunlight, and when we've got a camera. And we're going to end up deleting those anyways, but I'll show you how to navigate the viewport. Um, so first thing you can do is zoom in and out with your scroll wheel. That's why I asked everyone to bring a mouse with a scroll wheel. It's much easier to do that. Um, and then if you want to navigate around in 3D space, you're going to hold down the scroll wheel and just move your mouse. So you can navigate around in 3D space, look all around the object. And the other way to navigate in 3D space is going to be this little thing up in the corner. Um, does everyone have that? This little, it's got the air, like the Y, Z, X. Okay. So if you click on one of these, it'll take you to a preset viewpoint. And if you're wondering what viewpoint you're looking at, you can look up here and it'll say, for example, front. It'll say either front orthographic or front perspective. The difference between those is not of extreme importance. You've probably heard them if you've taken linear algebra. Um, but, and then we can kind of move around and then zoom in and out. So that is how you navigate the viewport. Um, so we're going to start modeling now. So this is the thing you do every time you open Blender pretty much, which is you press A to select all, you press X, and you click delete, and you get rid of everything. Um, and then we are going to do Shift A, which is for add, and it's going to give you this menu here, and it's got a lot of stuff. Um, you're going to want to go under Mesh and click Circle, which will build a circle in your scene. And unfortunately, there's this really nice add-on called Screencast Keys that would be showing you in the corner every key I'm pressing. They haven't updated it for compatibility with anything past 4.1 yet. which I discovered about 5 minutes ago when I tried to download it. So that's unfortunate. So we have this circle here, and now is probably a good time to explain uh, the modes of Blender. So we're going to worry about, oh, hey,
Hey guys, what did I miss?
we're starting on the Blender workshop.
Oh,
Um, so there's two main modes that we're going to be using today. There's quite a lot of modes, but if you click this, that will show you that we're currently in object mode. And in object mode, you can move around whole objects. Each one has a whole mesh attached to it and a bunch of other properties. But if you want to edit the vertices of a mesh and you want to model, basically, you're going to want to go to edit mode. So now you can see there's all these vertices. There should be 32 of them because I think that's the default. Um, 32 vertices that will show as these little dots. Um, so right now, we are in vertex mode, vertex selection mode. There are three selection modes. You can do vertex. It's up here, right next to where it says edit mode. You can do vertex select, edge select, which will show us like if you want to select an edge. Oh, to select something you left click, which I hesitate because they actually changed that from older versions, and it used to be right click and is one of my biggest pet peeves. Um, so if you want to select an edge, you left click on it and it'll light up. If you want to select a vertice, it's the same thing. And if you want to select multiple vertices at the same time, you hold down Shift while selecting. Um, all right. So another very useful thing that we are going to do, or that we're going to learn a hotkey, is Alt click. So if you hold down Alt and click a vertex, it's going to select the ring of vertices around it. That's called an edge loop. Um, but yeah, it'll select, in this case, the whole circle. So we have our whole circle selected. So now we're going to start modeling our wine glass. Yeah?
so I just opened up Blender, so I think that's oh, good name.
Okay. Um, so
Channel.
a lot of the time you would pull in a reference image at this point. One of the reasons I chose a wine glass is because I feel like it's a simple enough shape that you don't really need a reference image to make something reminiscent of a wine glass. So we're going to click this -Y and we're going to go to front view. So now you see it as kind of a flat um, thing here. So we're going to start what's called extruding. And if you want to pan your view without going around like this, you hold shift and then use your scroll bar as normal. So we can pan around in like 2D space pretty much. So this doesn't really look like a wine glass right now. What do we do about that? So first I'm going to teach you some of the very basic edit mode tools, and these also apply to object mode. So I like to think they're pretty intuitive with their hotkeys. If you want to scale, so change the size, you press S, and then you drag your mouse, and it will scale in and out. When you're happy with how big it is, you just click, and it will lock it in. If you want to rotate, you press R, and it'll rotate along a single axis. If you'd like to rotate along all axes, you tap R again, and it will now be rotating around all the axes at once. So basically it rotates around its center point. And if you want to undo an action while you're doing it, you right click. So if I want, I could um, roll it around here, decide I don't want to do that, right click. And as with any piece of software, pretty much, if you want to undo what you just did, Control Z. So that's pretty good. One last thing. G for grab. You can move anything around. And then same thing, lock it in or stop what you're doing. So we're going to start modeling with what is called extrusion. So again, hotkey is pretty intuitive here. Select all of the vertices that are going to make up the base of your wine glass, and then press E, and it will start extruding. So you kind of see we're a bit all over the place here. We can go wherever we want, but a wine glass doesn't go over here. So in order to lock it in on a certain axis, you press either X, Y, or Z. In Blender, Z is up, so we want to go up. Let's press Z, locks it in on that axis. So now we're going up and down. Um, so we can go, let's say here. Mhm.
How do I, um, priorities, I'm sorry, so,
This is also being recorded from the beginning, so um, so extrusion, like everything else, if you want to lock it in, you click. If you want to stop it, you right click. Um, so we're going to use everything we just learned to model the wine glass. So the reason why a lot of the times we start with cups is because it's pretty much just extrude upwards, scale down, and change it to whatever shape you want it to be. So I've kind of formed the base here. So I'm just going to freehand here what I think a wine glass looks like. I don't know. I'm 20 years old. Uh, but and then after I do that, I'll come around and help make sure everyone's kind of on the same page. I know I'm going fast here. Uh, and there we go. Um, so
repeat that last part.
yes, for sure. For sure. Sorry. So you just let's so we're going to E, Z, move your mouse to however far up you want it to be. That rhymes. Uh, and then click, scale down, do it again.
That's right.
Hmm?
That's X for scale down.
S for scale down, S for scale. And then you just keep doing that and moving stuff around until it looks like a wine glass. Um, and I'm gonna come around now and kind of help people with where they're at once I let's do this. There we go. Okay. So next step is going to be adding materials. Um, I remember this. Oh, there's one more step that I think we're gonna do just to make things better, which is we're going to add a modifier called Subdivision Surface, which will simulate having more geometry than you actually do to make your model look smoother. So there's two ways you can do this. You can, well, you can go over here to what's called the properties panel where you see like a trillion different things here, um, which has a lot of stuff you don't need, like hair. You can, yeah, you can add a lot of stuff with that. But the one we want is the wrench. So click the wrench, and oh, okay. You have to go back to object mode. That's the problem. Um, so there's two ways to go to object mode. You can either select object mode in this drop down, or you can just press tab, which will automatically switch you between object and edit mode. Yeah.
I added a song extra. So So
Did they change it so you can add modifiers in edit mode? Dang. Well, you can't apply them in edit mode. I think there used to be that you can add them in edit mode either, but either way. So you can click add modifier and there's a lot of different there's a big drop down here with a bunch of stuff. So for simplicity, I'm just going to click search and search subdivision surface. Um, and this will give us one level of subdivision surface. If you want more, you just up this box. Yep.
so how do you search for that?
So go to the wrench
Yeah.
and then click add modifier and click search.
There's not a search section on my thing.
Let me look.
I have. I tried to tried down.
It might just give you a list. If it just gives you a list, I'll subdivision service. Yep. So we have a wine glass. Um, and now we're going to do one more thing to make it pretty, which is so you're going to want to right click on it and click Shade Smooth. That makes it smooth. It changes uh it changes the way the normals are, but that's not important. Um another way to add subdivision surface, which I didn't learn for like years, but is really helpful. You can get rid of it over here. Control 2, and it'll give you 2 levels of subdivision surface. Control 4, 4. It's really helpful. Um, Usually I just do 2. Usually that's plenty. So now we have subdivision surface, and we've got a pretty nice looking wine glass. So now we are going to make it look like glass. It doesn't really look like glass right now. It looks like, I don't know, gray. People like to call this clay mode a lot of the time because it kind of looks like clay. So, speaking of different render modes, if you look up here in this corner, you're going to see 4 buttons. They're the this is the it says viewport shading menu. I guess that's what they want to call. Yeah.
Trying to do shade smooth, but it's not really working.
You're going to want to press the space bar and type in shade smooth. Sorry, yeah, I'm teaching as it is in the newest version. I'm not, this is a bit new to me too. I usually use 3.6, but I wanted to use all the cool new features. So, um, let's talk. So we've got these 4 modes. We've got wireframe mode, which will show your wireframe of your model. We've got clay mode, which will show the default, looks like clay. Then we've got material mode, which will lag out Blender. Um, this is what our material is right now, which is nothing. Um, and then we have one more option, which is render mode, which might make your computer sweat a little bit. Um, but again, render mode, we're not seeing much because we don't have a material on our object. So for the purpose of this section, let's turn it to material preview mode, which is the third one. It's got like checker boxes on it. Um, so how to describe a material? I should have written down what Schaefer said in my 321 class when he was talking about GPUs. Um, a material is you've got your polygon, and a material is like something layered on top of the polygon to show how it's going to be rendered. So, in this example, we have glass. So we're going to make a material that looks like glass, and that's going to render like glass. Um, so what we're going to do is make sure you have your object selected. So it should have the orange border around it. We're going to go back over here, and we're going to select this checker box. It says material. So here we see the material mode, and right now we have no materials on our object, which is why it's just rendering as this default white. So we're going to click New, and it might take a couple seconds. Um, But now we have a new material mapped onto our object. This is mapped onto all vertices of the object. Um, there is a way that you can put like one material on one part, one material on another part. We're not going to do that today. Um, but I'm going to open this up a bit so we can see all the settings we have. So one of the interesting things with Blender, I want to say 3.5 and above, is that they've added this thing called the principled BSDF. I don't know what BSDF stands for. I've been using this program for 9 years. I don't care. I think it's another way of saying shader. Um, but the thing about the principled BSDF is it can simulate pretty much any material by just changing these sliders. So there is, if you click this, you can see there is a glass option. I don't think it works very well. Um, so uh, I'm going to be using the principled version instead. Um, does everyone have a material that looks just plain white? So the principled BSDF works by having a bunch of these sliders. Some people have already been messing around with them. So one thing we need to do before we can do this is transparency and ray tracing is disabled in the new versions of Blender by default. I don't know why. Um, but we're going to have to enable them real quick. So a lot on here, there's one of these. Should be the second one from the top. This is render, and it looks like the back of a camera. Click that. It'll send you to this thing. It'll say render engine Eevee. So it'd say like sampling, viewport, render. Just click the checkbox that says ray tracing, and that's all you need to do. There are a lot of settings in here. Um,
What does ray tracing do?
so ray tracing kind of is a method of rendering where it shoots out rays from the camera lens and is like checking it allows for transparency. It's a fancy way that allows for transparency through objects. Without ray tracing, this you cannot see anything behind this cup. I how it actually works mechanically, I don't really know. And it's a similar concept to ray tracing that you may have used in Unity with the physics engine, but I don't really understand the mechanics behind it.
Yeah,
It's fancy.
there's a graphics class if you want it.
I want to take it, yeah.
I took it. It's proved out stuff. For Schaefer took it over. So I don't know if it's
Fancy mouth. Well, Schaefer loves GPUs, so um all right. So now we can go back to the materials tab and we are going to make this look like a glass. Or like it's made of glass. So we're going to open the transmission tab. There's only one thing under here. Transmission is a way of saying how much light is able to pass through this object, and you can set it from 0 to 1. We are going to take this slider and drag it all the way to 1. And our object will now allow light to pass through it.
oh no.
If your computer lags, that is normal. This is Blender. That's not normal.
It's like yeah, it's quaking. Why does it move?
All right.
Oh,
So we're going to do a few more changes to make this look more like a glass. I don't know what you did. Is it still white? Okay.
it's messy.
Okay, so we're going to make a few more changes. So most things on here are exactly what they sound like. You've got metallic, which will make the material shiny. So you can add a bit of a metallic value. You could make it completely metallic. You could do just a little bit. That's up for you to decide how shiny you want it to be. And then glass is smooth. So we're going to want to turn our roughness way down. And that's going to start us looking like a glass again. Okay.
So how do we get over here again? I'm sorry.
This is going to look a lot different in your version.
Okay.
Um, I don't really know how to translate the instructions over to your version, but I will help you after this step.
Sounds good.
Um, so, um, another thing we can do is we have an alpha layer. So if you've worked with like a PNG before, you know alpha means transparency. Right now we have an alpha value of 1, which means that this is fully opaque. But if we turn it down a little bit, the object will start to disappear. You can turn that, I don't know, like about zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8, I think looks pretty realistic. Um, so that's what we've got. Um, Another thing you're going to want to do is go down here. Uh, does everyone have, you can kind of mess with these sliders to your heart's content. Um, but one thing you're going to want to do is scroll down a bit under settings, surface, and enable ray traced transmission. That's going to, again, that also enables ray tracing. You kind of have to do it twice. You have to enable ray tracing on the render engine level, which is what we did first, and then you have to enable it on the specific object. I don't know why the Blender team decided to do that, but they did. Um, so now, if everything has been set up properly, I can show you something kind of cool. That you don't need to follow along with this. I'm gonna go fast. Uh, so we're in clay mode. We don't see anything behind there. And if you go in here, you will not only see the ball behind the glass, but you will see it affected by the refraction. If you would like to change how it looks with the refraction, there's something called the IOR, Index of Refraction. I don't know what that means, but if you change the value, it'll change how that ball looks. It can make it look cool. Um, there's a very cool website that I actually use. I forget the name of it, but it will tell you the actual index of refraction of different real world materials. So I believe that glass is actually 1.45 real life. So now we have that back there. Let's see what it looks like rendered. Bad.
Why?
Probably because we need a light on it. Again, don't feel the need to follow along with me. I just want to show you how it looks. Um, so we can see it's somewhat transparent. We've got the ball behind it. Got a sunlight. You can change how it looks. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, so you should have something that looks somewhat like this. And it, does anyone need help? I know you have a different version. I'm going to help you in a second. Does everyone working on this version have something akin to this, or should I come around? All right. This looks already pretty cool. Another cool thing you can do if you want is you can click on base color. It'll come up with a color wheel, and you can change it to whatever color you want. But it'll look most like a real wine glass if you leave it white. So now we're going to go to making a table. This is where we're going to go over texturing and UV unwrapping. So as you can see in my example image, we have this table surface down here. So the first thing I'm going to ask everyone to do is find a table texture. I think it'd be cool if everyone kind of had a different one. So just look up like wood texture and try to find something without a watermark. You should find something fine in Google Images. I'll give you a few minutes. Uh, we will continue at 6:45.
Did we download the image and find it? Yeah.
Yeah, download the image, put it wherever you want. All right, 6:45. So, um, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you're in object mode because we're going to be creating another object, which means another mesh. So just like we created the circle, we're going to do Shift A, and if that doesn't work for you, it probably means you're in edit mode. So make sure to go to object mode by either pressing tab or going to the corner. We're going to go to mesh, plane. It's going to make a flat plane. This is going to be our table. We want this to be bigger, so we are going to press S and scale it up to however big you want it to be. Um, I'm also realizing that I'm kind of running out of time. Okay. Um, so we've got this plane, and now I'm going to explain something called UV unwrapping, which I understand that is a kind of a block in a lot of people's learning of Blender. So the way I like to think of it is that you have the Earth. The Earth is a sphere, but when you have a map, it's flat. Earth flat? No. Uh, it, it means that you've taken a 3D object and you have cut it in certain places so that you can map it onto a flat surface. If you ever sew, that's another way to think of it. It's like a sewing pattern. Um, and then UV unwrapping is the process of effectively cutting your mesh so that you can lay it flat. These cuts are called seams. We don't need to do any seams for this because it's a flat plane, but I'll show you how to do it regardless. So um, we're going to go into edit mode. It also might be a good idea to turn back to clay mode at this point to avoid lag. Uh, and we've got this plane, and I'll show you how to add a seam if we wanted to add a seam. So I will go to edge select mode because you can only add seams on edges, not vertices. I don't, because you can't really cut at just a point. That doesn't make much sense. Um, you can select an edge, Control E, and there's a lot of stuff that comes up. The only thing you need to worry about is mark seam. And then that will turn that red, which means there's now a seam there. If you don't want a seam there, you can click it again, Control E, clear seam. So for example, if you had a sphere, you would what I usually do with spheres is I cut a loop around the middle and then do the two halves. That usually works pretty well for me. But what we want to do now is unwrap this plane. In order to see the unwrapped version, we're actually going to need to change our viewport a little bit. This here is called the outliner. There's three tabs we have open right now. We've got the properties tab, the viewport tab, and the outliner tab. There are many other tabs. Just a couple. I know what most of these do. Spreadsheet. Why would you want that? Python console. There's a lot of stuff in here. But what we want to do, we want to go all the way over to the left here and click UV editor, which is going to open up something like this. And then we're going to want to go back to our viewport and press A. And as you can see, our object is already kind of unwrapped because with these basic shapes, Blender does it for you. I'm going to give a little example of what you might want to do with UV unwrapping. Again, I'm going to go kind of fast, so there's no need to try and follow along. For example, say we wanted to, I'll use my example from earlier. Let's say we wanted to UV unwrap a sphere. So we have a sphere. I like to do it this way. Other people have other opinions. You can do it this way. So that's just an example of how you could, like, what a unwrapped object might look like that's not a flat plane. I wanted to go with a flat plane for this just because UV unwrapping is confusing. We only really have an hour. Um, so ignore that. So we have our UV unwrapped plane here. Let's put a texture on it. We're gonna do the same thing we did when we added the material to the glass. We're going to click New in our Materials tab. And with our glass, our base color, as you can see here, was just a color. It was just like an RGBA color. So if we want, um, we can change that around. And you're not going to see anything because I'm in clay mode. But if I went to material mode, change that around. But that doesn't really look like wood. So let's see what we can do about that. We're going to click this little yellow dot next to base color, open it up. There's a lot of stuff here. The only thing you need to worry about is image texture. Don't click magic texture. Don't don't even worry about that. Um, and it's going to load the black because we don't have an image. So so then you want to open an image. Sorry if I'm going fast. You're going to want to open an image, and this is going to just open up a file browser. Um, I have a bunch of garbage in my downloads. And just like any file browser, double click the thing you want to open, and it will open. And it will show you your wood texture on on your plane. So I went really fast there. I'm gonna go around again. Okay. Um, so I wanted to have us add our fancy background here. I don't know if we're gonna have time to do that, unfortunately. That's just a 360 image that you can put in, which make
Go a little long. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If it hasn't to allow it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
All right.
I wouldn't like have to do all that stuff. I think it's run through like just reminders, otherwise we'll just have to do. I might actually have to go here.
Sorry.
But you
Um, so we it's called an HDRI. It's a high definition resolution image, I believe. It's a 360 image scan, usually of like a room, that you can put in the background to make it look all fancy. Um, so you can search up like Blender HDRI and it'll pull up a website. Blender HDRI. I like this website Polyhaven. Um, you can go under HDRIs and find whatever. Um, and I think they're all free. Um, so it's just a website you can find wherever you want. Like over here, you can, if you want it to be indoor or like, um, I forget which one I used. I think, I don't know, but you could do like a restaurant. You click on it, and it's gonna be a big file. Um, if you don't want it to be as big, you can like put the size down. So, um, you're going to want to go into, there's another thing tab over here called World, and it should look like this. Do not click Use Nodes. It will undo that, and it will not work. Um, right now, this is what your background effectively looks like. So if you change this color, it won't do anything because we're not in render mode. But if you change that color when you're in render mode, it'll change the color of everything. But what we want to do is go to Color, Environment Texture, Open, and then it should be this .exr file type. So it looks like nothing happened, but we go into render mode and we're in a whole different world.
Oh, it's like we're really there. Oh my god.
I think this is one of the coolest features of Blender that no one ever talks about.
Oh, wait,
So
how did you add that again?
yeah, I will go over it right now.
Okay.
So there's a thing over here. It looks kind of like a little globe. World, there's a yellow dot next to color. So, and click that environment texture, and then it'll be just like adding an image texture. Yep. But yeah, and it will only, if it's not showing, make sure you're in the viewport render mode, the furthest one to the right over here. Um, but yeah, if you pan around, you will see this entire 360 whatever uh, view of like a building or whatever you chose.
Everything's dissolved.
All right. So now we're going to render out our image. So there's two things in Blender um, that you need to have when you're rendering, which are the same things you pretty much need when taking a picture in real life, which are a camera and lights. Um, since we're using this HDR background, you don't necessarily need lights because there are actually lights built into the texture that will bounce off your glass. Um, so like over here, there's the sun and stuff. So we'll still show how to use lights. Um, but first we're going to show how to use a camera. So when you render something in Blender, it's basically taking a picture of your 3D scene and turning it into a 2D scene. So we're going to do Shift A and we're going to go down to camera. Now it should add a little frustum thing in your scene. Does everyone have that? Yeah. So now if we want to see through our camera, there's a button over here. It's below the hand, above the little grid thing, it's a little video camera. This shows us what our camera is seeing. Nothing. So instead, let's move the camera around until it sees what we want it to see. Um, so this uh, G, G for grab. Um, and then we look into our camera's seeing, and it shows us the camera's view. And there's hotkeys here that I forgot what they are, and I need to figure out via muscle memory. Okay, it's G, press scroll wheel. If you press G and then you click your scroll wheel, you can move your camera's view in and out by moving the mouse. And if you want to rotate your camera, it's the exact same thing as everything else. This isn't the way we want to rotate it. You're probably going to be rotating on the Z-axis because that's up. So we can rotate like this. Just you can grab. Scaling doesn't do anything. But you can grab, move it around. I will help you in a second.
Sorry.
It's fine. Um, and you can move your camera to whatever view you want it to be. So you can kind of do from above, you can do from the side, you can do whatever you want. And then if you click it back into render mode, this is what our camera is seeing. And that's going to be it. And then, I don't know, I could show you cool stuff. But we should probably not do that. So lights, you add lights the same thing way you add anything else. Shift A, light. There's a few different kind of lights. The one I usually use is sun. It's the most powerful light, and it doesn't matter where it is in your scene. It doesn't actually change anything. The only thing that matters is its angle. So it simulates a sun being in your scene. So I can rotate it, and The thing is, when you're using a background texture like this, since it adds its own lights, it kind of overpowers any lights you're going to add. But even as I turn this, if you look there, you can see the shadow changing, just barely. So in the interest of time, I will help everyone with lights in a second, but I'm going to show you how to render out an object, or render out your scene. So you go up here to, there's File, Edit, we're going to click Render, Render Image. It'll load for a few seconds. In fact, sometimes it can, if you're doing a really, really crazy image, it will load for several hours. But this time it should, yeah, it takes a couple seconds. See, it told me it took 12.35 seconds.
Wait, you grab it again?
So go File, there's File, Edit, and then Render, Render, Render Image.
Okay.
I can help you in a second. And we have an image. Our efforts were not for naught. Um,
It's very easy.
and I think that looks pretty cool for being the first thing that someone may have ever made in Blender. If you want to save your image, you can click Image, Save As, and it, saves as you save anything. So, all right.
I be popping bottles, sparkles and champagne. VIP my section, royalty looking sexy, you know that be my name. I'm tired of the